you shouldn't just openly promise something and get people's hopes up, knowing that either there's nothing there or nothing really there that can be released, or it's just exceedingly difficult. So yes, this definitely has been. This has not been the Trump administration's finest hour. One might, I think, well argue that it has been their lowest hour.
Hi, I'm Fergus Macphee, and welcome to the Trump Report on Times Radio. You can watch us every day, Monday through Friday, on our YouTube channel, and you can also listen and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is author and host of The Josh Hammer Show. It's Josh Hammer himself. Josh, thank you so much for coming back on the show. How are you today?
It's a pleasure. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for asking. Now, it's been a massive week in US politics. The government shutdown is essentially over. We will get to that a little bit later. But there is only really one place to start, and that is with the release of, at first, 3 emails, and then following that, 20,000 documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I know you and I have spoken before this about this. I know you actually find this topic like a little bit distracting and a little bit boring, but there is a vote looming on the release of the files next week. Have the House Democrats essentially sort of done this already by starting this preemptive leak?
Well, it's a very cynical, albeit a pretty brilliant tactic from the Democrats. The Democrats right now, Fergus, are kind of all over the place because they won some of these off-year elections a couple of Tuesdays ago in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia. And then they decide to capitalize on that momentum by completely capitulating on the shutdown fight, which, to be clear, was somewhat inevitable because they didn't have any of the cards to play there. So I think that this Epstein document release is timed such that they are trying to change the narrative, change the news cycle, trying to regain momentum from what is at this point a not just an incipient, but indeed a raging civil war on the left side of the political aisle here in the United States. So the Epstein vote, I think, plays to Democrats' hands. Look, there are a few Republicans in the Congress who have joined forces. People like Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace of South Carolina. There are a handful of Republicans who have joined forces on some of these procedural votes to go ahead and release these Epstein files there. So if I had to guess, I think that they probably will. This vote that you're talking about next week probably will go as planned. Democrats are probably going to get what they want because they're going to have their ducks all lined up in a row. Hakeem Jeffries, the Democrats' minority leader on the House, is going to have his whole caucus. They're probably not going to break a single rank. So all you need is 1 or 2 Republicans to cross the aisle, and it's going to happen. For better or for worse, it's going to happen. Trump has apparently been trying to lobby Nancy Mace and Lauren Boebert, among others, on the phone, and they have essentially either not returned his calls or resisted him, which is the somewhat predictable effect of being a lame duck president, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing that probably would not have happened in the first term, but this is Trump's second term there. So, yes, to answer your question, I'm filibustering a little bit, I suppose, but to answer your question, I think the Democrats will have the votes for more files next week.
Yeah, there's been some suggestions that maybe even 40 or 50 Republicans might vote for it. I mean, we'll have to wait to see next week. But it is worth noting, I mean, when you see these headlines about this vote, they make for good reading, but it's not even the final vote, right? It has to get them picked up by the Senate and then would have to be signed off by the president.
Right. I mean, to pass any legislation, that's just the nature as to how it works here, right? Is any bill will have to pass both chambers. Now, an individual congressional committee can choose to make public certain things, assuming that all the legal processes are filed. That's essentially what happened this week in the House Oversight Committee. We've seen this any number of times in the past. There were more Russiagate files that were released just back in July, and that was mostly coming from the administration. But in the past, you've seen the Senate Intelligence Committee that has released previously heavily redacted files. So committees do have the ability to release documents. They have the subpoena power and things like that. But yes, in order to pass an actual piece of legislation, the House, the Senate pass, and the president has to sign that thing into law. Now, the 40 to 50 number that you just threw out there is pretty astounding. I think I did see that in one place, so I know that you're not making it up. I would be personally surprised for what it's worth because, albeit in someone in contrast to what I just said, yes, Trump is a lame duck second term president, but he really, really, really does not want this to happen. And we can debate why he does not want that to happen so much. But 40 to 50 is a large number. That's almost 25%, frankly, of the House Republican caucus. And I don't necessarily see a full quarter of the caucus willing to come out so against the president's priority. But that would be a massive, massive rebuke to
Mm.
President Trump, and frankly, would be, in my judgment, would be nothing particularly auspicious about what it says about Republican unity moving forward after they just lost these elections in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia a couple of Tuesdays ago.
Just going back to the files slightly, after the Democrats released those first few emails on Wednesday, Trump called it a hoax, and Republicans said that these had been cherry picked as an attempt to slander the president. Now, that is, of course, sort of their opinion, but I guess the emails that came out, those first three, they were at best sort of uncomfortable for the president. But I think I would probably argue there was no smoking gun. Let's say,
Right.
let's use that phrase. So if this does go to a vote, if all the files do eventually get released, and there certainly seems to be, some Republicans who would like this to all be over and see them released. For those who've been pushing for it, is there a danger there still won't be this sort of smoking gun, and all the energy they've put into it will feel a little wasted?
I think there probably is no smoking gun, Fergus, for the very simple reason that I think it would have come out some way somehow by now. And I say that with some degree of confidence because Democrats have been trying to get Trump every which way imaginable for literally a decade now. Literally a decade, going back to the 2016 presidential election cycle, going back to the RussiaGate hoax, the Hillary Clinton, Christopher Steele dossier plot that Trump was a Putin Manchurian candidate. I mean, they've tried to get him in virtually every way that you can try to get him, including infamously the Democrat lawfare complex, as I call it, and the attempts to prosecute him, incarcerate him. So I think if there was deeply, deeply incriminating evidence, someone would have leaked it to someone, and that would have been public by now. Now, it is a matter of public record that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein knew each other. That's not exactly surprising. It is also true, as Carolyn Levitt, the White House press secretary, said earlier this week. She said that Donald Trump actually kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago once these, what were then rumors about his terrible activities with underage girls, were further corroborated there. And Trump did take huge steps to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein after the worst of the worst was brought further to light. What I don't necessarily hear from the Democrats, who seem so chomping at the bit, they are putting on this face where they are professing to be so genuine and sincere about trying to seek justice for victims, which is a noble goal, by the way. But I question their motives on this for the very simple reason that if they were actually genuinely motivated to try to get justice for victims of these horrific pedophilia and sex trafficking operations there, shouldn't they start with Bill Clinton, who was notably closer? He was confirmed to be much closer to Epstein than Donald Trump. He actually visited Epstein's island in the Caribbean any number of times. He would fly on Epstein's plane, which he horrifically nicknamed the so-called Lolita Express. He was a frequent visitor to the island on that plane there. So if they actually were genuinely caring about this there, it seems to me like they would start there. But the fact that they're not doing so, to me at least, Fergus, kind of gives away the game here.
Just on that, yeah, did I not see an email this week where it came as a bit of a surprise to me that said Clinton had never been to the island?
Trump, you're talking about.
Clinton, I thought.
I did not see that. That's possible. He was definitely on the plane any number of times. So I suppose it's I think like 30 to 40 times he was on Epstein's private plane. I guess it's possible that the plane never made a stop at Epstein's island. But to be very candid with you, I actually did not see that exact data point there. It's entirely possible. You're right there. But at a bare minimum, we definitely know that he was on a private plane any number of times.
Mm. Let's talk about some of them. I said there was no sort of smoking gun in the emails. Obviously, we know one of the first ones that released sort of had that quote about Trump being the dog that wouldn't bark. There's another one with an email exchange with a New York Times reporter in 2015 where Epstein referred to wanting photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen. And there's another one from March 2018 between a person whose name has been redacted that said it will all blow over. They're really just trying to take Trump down and doing whatever they can do to do that. Epstein replied, "Yes, thanks, because I am the only one able to take him down." What do you think the mood be like within the Trump administration? Will they still be feeling uncomfortable by these?
I, the Epstein situation is obviously a massive, massive pain in the side. Okay, for the Trump administration for numerous reasons. They are apoplectic that the story just continues to drag on and on. It was a big deal back in July when Attorney General Pam Bondi and Kash Patel basically said that there's no there. There's really nothing that we can do there. There were many in the MAGA base, many vocal commentators who spoke out vociferously against it. So the fact that this is now a thing, so to speak, yet again, 4 months later, give or take, is just another massive headache, and frankly, it's quite demoralizing. I would think for the FBI director, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and other folks like that who had been kind of at the center of the storm, and frankly, the focus of a lot of ire from even many Trump supporters. So they would like nothing more, certainly, than for this story to go away. Now, what I called for back in July was I said that on the one hand, as you know, Fergus, I generally view this as something of a distraction. We all want just for victims. I think that there are genuine reasons. I'm a lawyer, like genuine reasons based on criminal procedure and grand jury testimony and statute of limitation. There are many reasons why justice has not come in the way that I think many folks would genuinely like to see justice come there. I would certainly welcome that if it were to come. That's true. On the other hand, it is simply true that the Trump administration, this was obviously not their finest hour. And, the Pam Bondi switcheroo from when she was on Fox News back in February, saying that the files are literally on my desk. And then 5 months later in July, saying that there really are no files. You can't square that circle. Okay. And I think that to this day, the administration would be well served to try to have just some sort of very public acknowledgement and reckoning to the American people. Trump could just give an address, right, and just explain what happened. I think that would go a long way, frankly, towards mollifying and assuaging a lot of these concerns. And it's probably something that he ought to do, especially if he wants to transition and pivot back to the economy, immigration, crime, and other issues that I know that he would very much like to focus on. So I would like to see something along those lines because as much as I personally am frustrated by the story, insofar as I'm a policy guy, I'm a law guy, I care about the policy, the substance, I care about trying to actually improve people's lives. The administration definitely has not handled this particularly finely. And unless and until they try to nip this thing in the bud, I think it's just going to be the dog that keeps on barking and just nips at them.
Is one of the reasons it's such a thorny issue, because I completely hear and I take your point that a lot of US voters probably want to get back to issues of the economy and immigration more, and I think you're right in saying that. Is one of the reasons it's such a thorny issue that outside of DC perhaps it's not like necessarily a red or blue issue?
Right. I mean, Epstein was, to be clear, he was a major Democrat donor. I'm sure he gave some donations to a Republican here or there, but he was definitely a Democrat major donor, and his social circles were mostly filled with upper class elites in urban environments, typically filled with Democrats, people like that. Bill Clinton, of course, is a particularly notorious example. But he was a prominent enough figure where there were people of all political and ideological stripes who were there in his orbit. And one of the reasons why this is not a particularly ideological issue, to kind of get back to the substance, that the substance here is disgusting. I mean, it is horrific beyond words. I mean, the acts that had been seriously alleged and in some ways have been corroborated. It's just awful. It's just absolutely awful there. And all of us again would like to see some sort of justice for these victims. I guess I will say this, Fergus. The Trump campaign in 2024, when they were campaigning to release the Epstein files, things like that, I was always skeptical of that for multiple reasons. One is that, on the one hand, it's just true that in a political context, you get on the stump, you say a lot of stuff that you think will kind of rile up enthusiasm and support and kind of galvanize voters. Nothing in a political rally speech should be taken at face value. Period. Full stop. End of story. Two, again, putting on my legal cap, there's no singular compendium of Epstein files. That's just literally just not how it works, right? There were separate investigations. First of all, Epstein. There was the local county investigation in Palm Beach County, Florida. Then there was the federal investigation when the DOJ got involved much later than that. So there was not going to be a singular kind of here's the grand jury testimony through the this, the that there. There was not going to be an easy way to release it there. Grand jury testimony really pretty much never gets released. There are extremely rare exceptions, but it's really hard to do, as we found out just recently yet again. So I was always skeptical of that, to be honest with you. But there were a lot of Trump supporters, I think, who took him at face value. And
It seems when you put it like that, is it almost a rare political misstep from Donald Trump?
I think in hindsight, this situation has definitely been mishandled for sure. I mean, you can't you shouldn't just openly promise something and get people's hopes up, knowing that either there's nothing there or nothing really there that can be released, or it's just exceedingly difficult. So yes, this definitely has been this has not been the Trump administration's finest hour. One might, I think, well argue that it has been their lowest hour. And unfortunately, I think the Democrats see that. They see that there's blood in the water. They see that Trump is vulnerable right now on this issue, not merely when it comes to left wing activists, however hypocritical they may or may not be in their motives here. But he's also vulnerable to a large swath of right wing activists there. Now, some of these conservative activists, these commentators and so forth, there who are really really passionate about the Epstein files, I don't think they necessarily speak, Fergus, for a massive swath necessarily of the MAGA base. You're talking here about the really, really plugged in folks, the folks who are attending the Trump rallies, who are deeply glued in on social media 24/7. I think the median Trump voter to this day really does care about the core issues: economy, immigration, crime, cost of living, affordability, drug trafficking, fentanyl overdoses, things like that. I think for the median, yeah, for the median MAGA voter, I think the Epstein stuff probably ranks between like the 40th and 50th most important issue. But for a small subset of deeply, deeply plugged in activists, this it definitely is very disappointing.
And I guess some of those plugged in people do have sway. And you mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene earlier. I wanted to ask you about her while I had you, because she's perhaps kind of unexpectedly been at the forefront of the push on the Republican side to release the files. Now, before the election, she was a huge Trump ally, and she's recently been quite critical of the president. Trump even said that she'd lost her way and was catering to the other side the other day. Now, she has sometimes been a controversial figure, but she's clearly a very passionate politician in what she believes in. She's not a, what do we say here, like a so-called career politician. And I kind of get the sense from this side of the pond that she is a little disheartened at the moment by Washington policy and I guess how the government machine works. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is a despicable, loathsome person. She recently had the audacity to accuse me of calling for Tucker Carlson's murder. She is cuckoo. She is crazy in many ways. There, this and that those accusations were completely obviously unfounded.
Mm.
It was a blatant, willful misinterpretation of an op-ed that I wrote for the British newspaper, the Daily Mail.
I was not aware of that. I apologize.
Yeah, well, she deserves all the rebuke that she can possibly get because it was beyond out of line for a sitting member of Congress to jump into this online mob that was sicked on me a couple weeks ago there. But she's been out to lunch for a while now, and I think that she would be better served to. I don't really know what she wants. She's made an awful lot of money, by the way, when it comes to stock trading over the course of her time in Congress. She's on the one hand she's either a Warren Buffett esque investing sage, or there's something a little fishy, shall we say, going on there, which may or may not be possible fodder for a future DOJ. I'm not entirely sure, but I guess we'll see what happens on that front there. But yeah, she's obviously been a thorn in the president's side on the Epstein stuff, on any number of the other president's other priorities as well. And it's this whole clique, by the way. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey, on the outside, people like Tucker Carlson. It's the whole wing that is increasingly opposing Donald Trump when it comes to a bunch of issues, the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, the Epstein files, some other stuff as well, frankly, there. And it kind of leads you to wonder, what is their actual motivation here? Well, I'll just be very candid with you. I've said this publicly many times. My theory on their motivation is that they're trying to actually implode the American right, implode the current conservative movement coalition, implode the current MAGA coalition as it is, in the hopes that they will then be the leaders or whatever is then built on its ashes come 2028. It is very self-serving, it is very cynical, it is definitely not productive, and it's definitely not helpful to the country.
And would you say, I think we are seeing that a little bit, right, in terms of online commentators on the right at the moment?
Oh yeah, you're absolutely seeing it. There are Tucker is the leader of them, but there is a whole wing of folks there who are now seemingly openly opposing Trump. Part of that, as you said earlier in the conversation, is the lame duck effect of being in a second term. But I think there actually is something more sinister or more ambitious, we might say, going on here, which is that they genuinely don't like the current composition of the American right, and they want to take it in a very 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 different direction, one that I think most American conservatives would not even recognize and would definitely dread.
Let's move on now to the government shutdown because the longest one in US history is now over. And earlier this week, Donald Trump was celebrating, calling the reopening a very big victory. A handful of Senate Democrats broke ranks to vote to reopen, which angered many on the left of the party. What are they getting in return, Josh? Because from where I'm looking at it, the answer seems to be not much.
You're correct. They're getting virtually nothing. So they're getting so all the federal employees and all the federal government bureaucrats who were furloughed and or outright fired over the course of this record-shattering 43-day shutdown, they're all going to get back pay and they're all going to be hired back, which I'm not happy about, to be honest with you. I think a lot of conservatives who think that there's too much bloat, that there's too much deep state bureaucracy in the swamp in Washington. We wanted more folks, frankly, to be furloughed and wanted them to be fired if they were just doing their mooching on the taxpayer and not serving a vital government function, which probably is a lot of these folks. So I'm not thrilled with that. That's the closest thing that Democrats can claim to a win right now, though, because there's really nothing else that comes anywhere even close to a win. I mean, their number one ostensible reason for engaging in this shutdown was that they were fighting to renew Obamacare healthcare subsidies that were about to expire. It was a self-serving tactic all along because these Obamacare tactics were, or excuse me, the Obamacare subsidies were always going to disproportionately harm blue state Democrat state voters more than red state voters if they were not renewed. It was the blue states where the healthcare premiums were going to shoot up by a mass percentage. The red states would have been more temperate. So they were fighting really on behalf of only their own voters, and they decided to take the whole country hostage to do so. And on that issue, which they purportedly made the whole reason for the shutdown, they didn't get anything. They literally got a vague promise from John Thune, the Republican leader of the Senate, that they would hold a vote on this next month. One, that vote's not going to pass. Two, Mike Johnson, the House, didn't even promise that. So I mean, they got virtually nothing. Their tails between their legs. It all backfired. Chuck Schumer, I think, looks like a big idiot right now, and that's the reason why the Democrats' civil war is raging, and that's why they're trying to distract with the Epstein stuff.
Let's go back to what you said at the start of that answer because it's so long ago now. But I remember towards the start of the shutdown, the Trump administration were talking about maybe thousands of federal employees not returning. But are you saying that you're disappointed you haven't seen that happen?
Correct. They have agreed to hire back all of them. That's part of the
Yeah.
agreement. So that is why my line, Fergus, has been not that the Republicans won the shutdown fight, but Democrats definitely lost it. Democrats definitely lost the shutdown fight, and by definition of America's fractious two-party political system, when one party loses, the other party wins. So it's a de facto win, I suppose, for Trump and Republicans, but it's not exactly a substantive conservative victory. Let's
Hmm.
say that.
I think when you put it like that, especially in what the Democrats are getting in return, I'm inclined to agree with you. Will the American public necessarily agree with that? I mean, you and I both know in politics, it's more difficult for the incumbent when something like this happens, often.
I think that the American people are not happy when the government shuts down. So the American people have famously paradoxical views when it comes to the federal government. On the one hand, they say that the government is too big and it's going to shrink government. On the other hand, they say that the government should be doing more, should be proactive. The polls are just are infamously schizophrenic, frankly, on these particular questions, depending on the particular way that pollsters phrase the questions to the people. But there are a lot of Americans who rely on some form of welfare. So one of the big things that happened over the course of this shutdown fight was that SNAP payments, the food stamps, largely expired on November 1st. It was litigated for a couple of weeks there. You had one judge say you have to keep on going. Long story short, they essentially reduced it to 60 to 65% of food stamp payments until the government reopened there. The number of Americans who are on food stamps is over 40 million people. It's like 42 million, give or take. That's a very, very large number. Frankly, it's probably far too many, right? I'm sure that includes many able-bodied folks who should be working, but that's a conversation for another day. The point for purposes right now is that there are a lot of people who depend on the government. And we also started seeing towards the end of the shutdown in the final couple of weeks, just a ton of flight cancellations. Air traffic controllers were having a hard time showing up there. There were all sorts of anecdotal stories of these 25 to 30 plane lines at the airport to kind of get off the runway, historic delays there, cancellations. I mean, as far as the eye can see. So a lot of folks are really upset. And it's going to depend who gets the blame game ultimately for this particular shutdown. But Given the fact that left-wing media here in the United States is so apoplectic at how this ended, I think that kind of gives away the game, that the left realizes that the Democrats didn't get what they want out of the shutdown, and that by definition means that they lost. And if they lost, then I think to a lot of voters that means they're ultimately to blame.
Let's just end then with the president's approval rating after this. Now, I'm going to put my cards on the table straight away. I'm never sure how much we should actually read into approval ratings, but as of today, it's 39% approve and 57% disapprove on average, which is a net rate of minus 18. I guess the retort to that is that yes, it's fallen lower, so low quicker than any other president in recent memory, but the midterms are still a year away, and it's only slightly below what it was in his first term. And obviously, we know he got elected again. Can he sort of read in anything into this ahead of the midterms next year?
Well, it definitely is troubling. I would caution the president's team against just ignoring that sort of poll in the same way that I would caution them against ignoring what the voters in New York City, New Jersey, and Virginia said at the exit polls a couple Tuesdays ago, which is that the economy is what they care about. Affordability, cost of living, inflation, those are the issues that really are motivating American people at this time. And that's probably one of the reasons why his approval ratings have unfortunately gone down over the course of this first year in office. Now, on the other hand, you are right that, approval ratings are approval ratings. They're not meant to be kind of the most important thing in the world. And Trump's approval ratings in his first term really never got above 43, 44%. And he still had a very competitive 2020 election there. But his approval ratings were for a while actually net positive early on in the start of his first term there. So that's still a pretty substantial swing. I think that he absolutely can turn around, but it's going to require nipping this Epstein thing in the bud, perhaps by doing along the lines of what I suggested, if I may say so myself, and then just really focusing on a day-to-day basis. Start every day. Here's the morning briefing. Here's what we're doing today to make the American people's lives easier and better. Here's what we're going to do today to make them have an easier time to purchase their whole shopping cart in the supermarket, not have to return certain goods or to trade or mix and match due to economic trade-offs. Here's what we're going to do today to make them have an easier time paying for gasoline at the pump, bring down cost of inflation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That has to be the daily, day in, day out, laser focus approach of this administration. I really do think that if they stick to that, then those numbers can turn around easily. But it's going to require a little more discipline, perhaps, than what we've seen sometimes.
Yeah, and just finally, apologies to go back to Marjorie Taylor Greene, but that's one of the criticisms she's leveled at him, that he's focusing too much on his foreign policy agenda. Are you saying you'd like to see him sort of go back to perhaps the America First agenda that was promised before the election?
Well, I don't see those as necessarily irreconcilable. I mean, a president is the commander in chief of the most important military in the world. He's obviously
Mm,
going to have his hand in foreign policy. Historically speaking, presidents have a disproportionate hand in foreign policy for that
yeah.
very constitutional reason that they are the commander in chief. And this president has had a tremendously successful foreign policy, Fergus. I mean, look at all the peace deals that he's brokered. It's really quite astounding, actually. I mean, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Rwanda and the Congo, India and Pakistan, Cambodia and Thailand. I mean, he has an incredible pro peace track record. So I would definitely not encourage him to give up on foreign policy there. I do like the fact that he's focusing currently on Latin America, right in America's own
Yeah.
backyard, when it comes to the drug interdictions and the drug smuggling vessels down off the coast of Venezuela and in the Caribbean. I like that. But yes, if you're gonna triage, so to speak, and you're going to shift some attention, I do think that bringing some more attention back to the domestic front, really on economic issues above all, probably is a good thing to do.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for joining us on the Trump Report today.
Thank you so much.